The elegant St. Michael's Chapel fell silent as Detective Sarah Morrison strode down the aisle, badge glinting in the stained glass light. Behind her, two officers followed with handcuffs ready. The bride, Elena Martinez, stood at the altar in her pearl-white gown, a serene smile playing across her lips as she watched her groom's face drain of color. When the detective announced, "James Walker, you're under arrest," Elena calmly reached into her bouquet and withdrew a small envelope. Inside were photographs, evidence she'd been gathering for months, documenting her fiancé's carefully hidden double life. But what drove a woman to orchestrate her own wedding day arrest of the man she was supposed to marry? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 months earlier, the autumn air carried the gentle sounds of classical music across the marble terrace of the Riverside Museum of Art. Elena Martinez adjusted her navy cocktail dress, a practical choice that reflected her nature as much as her profession. At 42, she'd built a respected career as a forensic accountant, finding stories in numbers that others missed. Tonight's charity gala, benefiting victims of financial fraud, felt like home ground. She noticed him before he approached, tall, distinguished, with silver threading his temples in a way that spoke of earned wisdom rather than just years. His tuxedo fit him with the ease of someone accustomed to formal wear, but it was his eyes that caught her attention, keen, intelligent, and focused entirely on her. The Monet takes on a different character at night, doesn't it? His voice carried the warmth of aged bourbon. James Walker extended his hand, his three-piece tuxedo catching the soft gallery lighting. "Though I suspect you see patterns everywhere, given your line of work." Elena's eyebrow arched slightly. "You seem to have me at a disadvantage, Mr. Walker. Please call me James." His smile was disarming. "And I made it my business to know who you are when I saw you studying the donor wall with such intensity. Forensic accounting must give you an interesting perspective on philanthropy." She smiled, appreciating his directness. "We all leave traces in the numbers. Sometimes they tell stories people would rather keep hidden." "How fascinating." He gestured toward the garden terrace. "Would you share some of those stories over a glass of wine? I promise to be an attentive student." That evening unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance. James listened with genuine interest as Elena explained the intricacies of following money trails, sharing sanitized versions of cases that had made her reputation in the field. He asked intelligent questions, showing an understanding of financial systems that matched her own. "My investment firm specializes in ethical venture capital," he explained, producing a business card that caught the light with subtle elegance. "We believe in building wealth through transparency and integrity. Your work, it resonates with our mission." The card felt substantial in Elena's hands, the raised lettering of Walker Capital Partners speaking of old-world craftsmanship. She tucked it into her clutch, next to her own cards, simple, professional, declaring her expertise in forensic financial investigation. Their conversation flowed seamlessly from professional to personal. James spoke of his late wife, Sarah, lost to cancer 5 years ago. Elena shared her own story of focusing on career after an early divorce, finding purpose in protecting others from financial predators. There was something comforting in their shared experiences, their mutual understanding of loss and redemption. As the evening drew to a close, James helped Elena with her wrap, his fingers lingering momentarily on her shoulders. "I'd very much like to continue our conversation, Elena. Perhaps over dinner next week." She found herself nodding, surprising herself with the ease of her acceptance. Later, preparing for bed in her carefully organized apartment, Elena studied James's business card again. Everything about him seemed to align perfectly, his values, his intelligence, his gentle charm. Yet something in her training, in the instincts that had served her so well professionally, whispered a quiet note of caution. She dismissed it as professional paranoia, the habitual skepticism that made her good at her job but sometimes complicated her personal life. Still, she found herself opening her laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard, before closing it again with a small, self-deprecating laugh. Not every connection needed to be investigated. Sometimes, she told herself, a perfect evening could simply be what it appeared. The 3-carat diamond engagement ring that would grace her finger 4 months later still lay in its velvet box in James's safe, waiting for the moment that would set in motion events neither of them could have predicted that autumn night. Winter settled over the city like a silk shawl, transforming evening walks into intimate adventures shared under starlit skies. Elena found herself falling into an easy rhythm with James, their lives interweaving with a natural grace that made her previous relationships seem like rough drafts of what love could be. "You've got that look again," Maya, Elena's younger sister, observed over their weekly Sunday brunch. Steam rose from her coffee cup, mirroring the warmth in her eyes. "The one that says you're analyzing instead of feeling." Elena traced the rim of her own cup, considering. "It's not analysis, exactly. James is—" She paused, searching for the right words. "He's perfect. Almost too perfect. And that's a problem. Because—" Maya's tone was gently teasing, but her eyes held understanding. She'd watched Elena build walls of spreadsheets and financial statements around her heart for years. "Because perfection makes me suspicious." Elena smiled ruefully. "Professional hazard." "Speaking of professional," Maya reached into her bag. "You left this at my place last week." She handed over a business card, one of James's. Elena had been collecting them, a habit she couldn't quite explain. Each one was identical, yet sometimes she caught subtle variations in the weight of the paper, the sheen of the lettering. That afternoon, in her home office, Elena found herself laying out the collected cards like pieces of a puzzle. 3 identical cards, but the registered office addresses varied slightly, a simple typographical error perhaps, or different branches of the same firm. She opened her laptop, fingers hovering over the keys as they had that first night. This time, she didn't close it. Public records showed Walker Capital Partners registered at all 3 addresses, but with slightly different incorporation dates. Nothing unusual for a growing firm, she told herself, even as she noted the pattern of registrations coinciding with major market upheavals. Her best friend David, a corporate lawyer she'd known since college, dropped by that evening with takeout and shop talk. "You're doing that thing again," he observed, watching her organize. Files on her coffee table. "The one where you turn date night into due diligence." Elena smiled, acknowledging the truth in his gentle ribbing. "Old habits. But James is different. He understands the work we do, supports it even. His firm's commitment to ethical investment." "Walker Capital Partners?" David's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "That's interesting. We had a client last month who mentioned them, but in connection with a completely different type of investment strategy." He shrugged. "Probably just a similar name." A week later, James took Elena to the symphony. As Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet overture filled the concert hall, she found her mind wandering to the conversation with David. James's hand covered hers, warm and reassuring, his platinum cufflinks catching the dim light. "One bore his initials, J.W., while the other—" "Beautiful piece," he murmured, noticing her attention. "Though I prefer Beethoven for its complexity, the way themes weave together and separate, each telling its own story while contributing to the whole." Elena nodded, letting the music wash over her. Like Beethoven's compositions, James seemed to have layers, themes that didn't quite align when examined closely. His phone would sometimes ring late at night, calls he'd take in his study. With the door closed. "Business never sleeps," he'd explain with an apologetic smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Their engagement came as winter melted into spring, a proposal so perfectly orchestrated it felt like a scene from a film. The 3-carat diamond caught the last rays of sunset as James knelt before her in the Japanese garden where they'd shared their first kiss. Elena said yes through tears of joy, even as a small voice in the back of her mind catalogued the serial number on the ring's certification, noting its similarity to numbers she'd seen in a case study on diamond investment fraud. That night, as James slept beside her, Elena slipped from bed and opened her laptop. The soft blue light illuminated her face as she began a deeper search into Walker Capital Partners. The business card on her desk seemed to mock her with its perfect lettering, its promise of transparency and integrity. She traced the embossed logo with her finger, remembering James's words from their first meeting. "We all leave traces in the numbers." "Indeed we do," she whispered to herself, beginning to type. "Indeed we do." The first real crack in James's perfect facade appeared on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Elena had stayed overnight at his penthouse, something that had become increasingly common since their engagement. She was searching his home office for a spare phone charger when she found the bank statement, carelessly left in the printer tray. Her trained eye caught the anomalies immediately. International wire transfers, all hovering just below reporting thresholds, flowing through a complex network of shell companies. The pattern was familiar. She'd seen similar structures in money laundering cases she'd helped prosecute. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she photographed the statement with her phone, her mind already mapping the transaction flows. The amounts matched perfectly with several large deposits she'd noticed in James's personal account, which he'd explained as investment returns when she'd casually inquired. "Darling?" James's voice from the hallway sent her heart racing. She returned the statement to the printer tray, grabbed a charger, and closed the drawer with practiced calm. "In here," she called back, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Just borrowing a charger." James appeared in the doorway, impeccable in his morning suit. "I thought we might have breakfast together before my meeting." His smile was warm, genuine. How could it be genuine? "That little cafe you love on Madison." Over coffee and croissants, Elena watched him with new eyes. Every gesture, every expression she'd grown to love now carried a shadow of doubt. When his phone buzzed with what he called an urgent client matter, she found herself noting the time, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed once on the table before he excused himself. That afternoon, she pulled up the cases she'd worked on involving similar financial patterns. The methodology was sophisticated, showing an intimate knowledge of banking regulations and reporting requirements. Her cursor hovered over the search field, James's name waiting to be typed. The weight of her engagement ring felt suddenly heavy. A knock at her office door startled her. "Ms. Martinez?" A woman stood in the doorway, badge visible on her belt. "I'm Detective Sarah Morrison. I was hoping to discuss one of your recent cases, the Henderson investment fraud." Elena minimized her search window. "Of course, Detective, please come in." Detective Morrison was sharp-featured and direct, with eyes that missed nothing. "We've uncovered some new evidence suggesting the Henderson case may be connected to a larger network of investment fraud. Your analysis was instrumental in the original conviction." As they reviewed the case files, Elena's mind raced. The Henderson case had involved a sophisticated Ponzi scheme, with victims carefully selected from wealthy philanthropic circles. The same circles where she'd met James. "The interesting thing," Detective Morrison continued, spreading out photographs of bank statements, "is the pattern of international transfers, almost identical to what we're seeing in several other cases." Elena's throat tightened as she recognized the structure, the same pattern she'd seen that morning in James's statement. "Have you identified any suspects in the new cases?" "We have. Some leads." Morrison's gaze was penetrating. "But these people are sophisticated. They understand forensic accounting, know how to stay just under the radar. almost as if they have inside knowledge of financial investigation techniques. That evening, Elena sat in her apartment, surrounded by case files and financial records. James had called, his voice warm with concern about her working late. "Don't exhaust yourself, darling. The wedding plans can wait another day." The wedding, 3 months away. Elena looked at the seating chart she'd been working on, each name card now carrying the weight of potential complicity or victimhood. How many of their guests had invested with Walker Capital Partners? Her phone lit up with a text from Maya. "Dress fitting tomorrow. Can't wait to see my big sister as a bride." Elena stared at the message, tears blurring her vision. The life she'd thought she was building, the future she'd planned, was unraveling like a sweater caught on a nail. Pull one thread, and the whole thing could come apart. She opened her laptop again, this time with purpose. If James was who she feared he was, she needed proof. Not just for herself, but for everyone he'd ever deceived. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, building a search algorithm she'd developed for tracking complex financial fraud. "Oh, James," she whispered as the first results appeared. "What have you done?" The engagement ring caught the light from her desk lamp, sending prisms dancing across her wall. Elena watched them move, remembering James's words about patterns and stories hidden in plain sight. She'd built her career on finding those patterns, following those stories to their true endings. Now she had to decide, would she be James Walker's wife or his downfall? Detective Morrison's card sat on her desk, a simple white rectangle that represented a choice. Elena picked it up, her decision crystallizing with the clarity that had always served her well in her professional life. She reached for her phone. "Detective Morrison, this is Elena Martinez. I think I may have some information about your investigation, but we need to be very careful about how we proceed." Elena discovered that leading a double life required a peculiar kind of artistry. Each morning, she'd kiss James goodbye, playing the role of the devoted fiancé planning their perfect day. Each night, she'd work methodically through financial records, building a case against the man she was supposed to marry. The discovery of James's hidden phone came during a routine evening at his penthouse. She'd noticed him carrying 2 phones before, but he'd explained it away as one for business, one personal. Tonight, while he was in the shower, she found a third device tucked behind his desk drawer, a basic burner phone, the kind that showed up in nearly every financial fraud case she'd worked. "Just finishing up some emails," she called out when she heard the shower stop, her heart pounding as she quickly photographed the phone's screen. The contact list was sparse, but one name. You caught her eye, Henderson. "Don't work too hard." James's voice carried from the bathroom, warm with affection. "Wedding plans are stressful enough without adding business to the mix." Elena smiled despite herself. He was right about the stress, though not in the way he imagined. That afternoon, she'd sat with Maya at the florist's, discussing bouquet arrangements, while mentally cataloguing offshore account numbers she'd discovered. "You seem distracted," Maya had observed, touching her sister's hand. "Having second thoughts?" "Just wanting everything to be perfect," Elena had replied, the half-truth bitter on her tongue. She couldn't tell Maya the real reason for her preoccupation, that she'd spent the morning with Detective Morrison, reviewing evidence that linked James to at least 3 major investment frauds. "Mrs. Walker," the florist had said, testing out her future name. Elena had managed not to flinch, but only barely. Each wedding preparation now felt like another step in an elaborate trap, one she was setting herself. James emerged from the bathroom, dressed casually in a way that still managed to look elegant. "Come to bed, darling. These emails can wait." She closed her laptop, hiding the spreadsheet where she'd been tracking his international money movements. "You're right. I'm being obsessive about work again." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, nuzzling her neck. "It's one of the things I love about you, your dedication. We're alike that way. The irony of his words made her chest tight. They were alike, but not in the way he thought. Both of them were playing roles, maintaining facades, keeping secrets. The difference was, she now knew both sides of the story. Later, that night, as James slept beside her, Elena slipped out to the balcony with her phone. The city lights sprawled below, a maze of illuminated streets and shadows that reminded her of James's financial networks. Complex, interconnected, designed to confuse and mislead. The Henderson connection is significant, Detective Morrison had told her earlier that week, in a coffee shop far from their usual haunts. But we need more. These types of cases are won or lost on documentation. Elena looked back through the glass doors at James's sleeping form. The man she'd fallen in love with, the man who'd brought her coffee in bed and kissed away her doubts, was also the man who'd destroyed countless lives through his elaborate financial schemes. Her phone vibrated. AE, message from David. Found something interesting in those incorporation documents. Call me when you can. She'd enlisted David's help cautiously, telling him she was doing background research for a potential client. His legal expertise had already proved invaluable in understanding the full scope of James's operations. The night air carried the scent of approaching spring, reminding her that their June wedding date was drawing closer. Every decision now carried double meaning. The seating arrangements that would help police identify key players in James's network, the ceremony timing coordinated with law enforcement, even her dress alterations designed to conceal a recording device coming back to bed. James's sleepy voice startled her. Just needed some air. She turned, composing her features into a smile. Wedding jitters, I suppose. He pulled her close, his touch still electric despite everything she knew. Having doubts about becoming Mrs. Walker? Never, she lied, hating how easily it came now. Just wondering how I got so lucky. His chuckle was warm against her hair. I'm the lucky one, Elena. You're everything I've been looking for. In that moment, with the city lights twinkling below and James's arms around her, Elena almost wavered. The evidence was circumstantial, she told herself. There could be explanations for the patterns she'd found. Then she remembered the faces in Detective Morrison's case files, elderly couples who'd lost their retirement savings, charities defrauded of their endowments, all while trusting smiles. And warm embraces like this one had made them feel special, chosen, lucky. Elena leaned into James's embrace, using the moment to steady herself. She was everything he'd been looking for, all right. A forensic accountant with access to high-net-worth social circles, someone whose reputation would help him gain new victims' trust. The perfect, unwitting accomplice. But she'd chosen a different role in this play. And like James, she would perform it flawlessly until the final curtain. The investment portfolio that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday, delivered to Elena's office by courier, accidentally sent to her instead of James. The manila envelope felt ordinary in her hands, but its contents would prove to be anything but. Just dropped off at reception, her assistant mentioned, from Walker Capital Partners. Elena waited until she was alone before opening it. Inside, she found exactly what she'd been hoping for. Comprehensive documentation of James's investment. Schemes, complete with client lists and transaction histories. The mistake had been carefully orchestrated, an anonymous tip to the courier service ensuring the delivery would go astray. Her trained eye moved across the numbers, seeing beyond the surface to the ugly truth beneath. The investment structures were beautiful in their complexity, like elaborate origami folded from other people's dreams. Each page revealed new layers of deception, showing how James had built his empire on carefully constructed lies. My God, she whispered, recognizing names from their wedding guest list among the victims. The Hendersons weren't an isolated case. They were just one thread in a tapestry of fraud that stretched across continents. Her phone buzzed. James calling. Elena took a deep breath, steadying herself before answering. Darling, has a portfolio. Delivery arrived at your office by any chance? His voice carried just the right note of concern. There seems to have been a mix-up. Yes, just now, she replied, her own voice carefully modulated. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. Would you like me to send it over? I'll pick it up myself, he said quickly. Over dinner? That new French place you've been wanting to try? Perfect. She ended the call, her hands already moving to scan the documents. She had 4 hours until dinner. 4 hours to document evidence of fraud that spanned a decade. The restaurant was all soft lighting and discreet luxury, James's preferred environment for handling delicate matters. He'd chosen a corner table, positioning himself to watch the door. Elena wondered if he always did that, and she was only noticing now. The portfolio? He asked, after they'd ordered, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. She reached into her bag, producing the manila envelope. I have to admit I was tempted to look. Professional curiosity. She smiled, playing her part. But client confidentiality is sacred, isn't it? Indeed it is. He tucked the envelope into his briefcase, relaxing slightly. Though I've often thought we should combine our expertise. Your forensic skills would be invaluable to our compliance department. Elena sipped her wine, considering the layers in his offer. Was it a test, an attempt to keep her closer or to compromise her professionally? That's sweet, but you know what they say about mixing business and pleasure. His laugh seemed genuine. Always my practical, Elena. It's one of the things I love most about you. Later that night, in her apartment, she reviewed her scans of the documents with Detective Morrison. The detective's face grew increasingly grave as they worked through the evidence. This is bigger than we thought, Morrison said, spreading out. Printouts across Elena's dining table. These investment structures, they're feeding into accounts we've been tracking in 3 separate investigations. Elena nodded, pointing to a series of transactions. Look at the timing. Each new scheme launches just as the previous one starts to show stress. It's like watching dominoes being set up to fall. And the wedding guest list? At least 30. Potential victims, maybe more. Elena pulled up the seating chart on her laptop. He's planning to use the wedding as a networking opportunity. All these people in one room watching him marry a respected forensic accountant. The perfect legitimacy boost, Morrison finished. No one would suspect a man who could win someone. Like you. The words hit Elena harder than she expected. She walked to her window, looking out at the city lights. Behind her she could hear Morrison shuffling papers, giving her a moment to compose herself. There's something else, the detective said finally. We found a pattern in his previous relationships. 3 engagements, all to women with connections to financial oversight or law enforcement. None of the weddings took place. Elena turned. Back, her professional mask firmly in place. What happened to them? Nothing violent, Morrison assured her quickly. They all withdrew their savings and disappeared shortly before the weddings, left behind apologetic notes about cold feet. Their accounts were drained within days. A chill ran through Elena as pieces clicked into place. The careful questions James asked about her investments, his suggestions about consolidating their finances after the wedding, his insistence on a large ceremony with all their professional contacts present. He's not just using the wedding for networking, she realized. It's part of his exit strategy. Either I play my role and give him legitimacy, or I run and give him a cover story for his own disappearance. Which is why we need to move carefully, Morrison stressed. One wrong move and he'll vanish with everything. Elena's phone lit up with a text from James. Missing you tonight. Can't wait to make you Mrs. Walker. She showed it to Morrison, her smile bitter. Don't worry, detective. He'll get his perfect wedding day, just not the one he's planning. After Morrison left, Elena sat alone with her laptop, reviewing the evidence they'd gathered. The pieces were coming together, forming a picture that both horrified and fascinated her professionally. In another context, she might have admired the intricacy of James's schemes, the way he'd woven truth and lies together until they were almost indistinguishable. Almost. But she'd built her career on finding the flaws in seemingly perfect frauds. Now she just had to maintain her own perfect fraud for a little while longer. She touched her engagement ring, feeling its weight. No longer a promise of love, but a reminder of every lie she was unraveling, every truth she would eventually expose. "Game on, James," she whispered to the empty room. "Game on." The USB drive that exposed James's entire network was delivered to Elena by a former client, a retired banker who'd worked with her on fraud investigations before. His hands shook as he placed it on her desk. "I should have seen it sooner," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "Walker Capital Partners approached our investment group last month. Something felt off, but I couldn't place it until I saw your engagement announcement in the society pages." Elena inserted the drive into her laptop, her breath catching as files populated the screen. Transaction records, shell company structures, and correspondence logs painted a picture of an operation far more sophisticated than even she had imagined. "These patterns," she murmured, "they're not just about money laundering. This is a global network." The retired banker nodded grimly. "Your fiancé isn't just running investment scams. He's providing financial infrastructure for other criminal enterprises. The legitimate investments are just a cover." After he left, Elena spent hours mapping the connections. James wasn't working alone. He was part of an international syndicate that specialized in making dirty money look clean. Walker Capital Partners was just one node in a vast web of financial manipulation. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Late meeting tonight, darling, but I've made reservations for tomorrow at La Maison. The chef wants to discuss our wedding menu." Eleanor stared at the message, remembering their first dinner there, how James had charmed the chef with his knowledge of French cuisine. Now she wondered how many of those business dinners had really been meetings with his criminal associates. Detective Morrison arrived as sunset, painted Eleanor's office in shades of amber. The detective's usual professional demeanor cracked slightly as she reviewed the new evidence. "This is what we've been missing," Morrison said, spreading printouts across Elena's desk. "Look at these shell companies. They match patterns we've seen in cases across 3 continents. Eleanor pointed to a series of transactions. "The timing is deliberate. Each major investment push corresponds with known criminal activities. He's not just hiding money, he's moving it strategically, which makes the wedding more than just a networking opportunity," Morrison added. "It's a summit meeting. Half the guests on your list are connected to international finance." "The perfect cover," Elena said bitterly. "Who'd suspect anything nefarious at a society wedding?" They worked late into the night, building a comprehensive picture of James's network. Each new discovery felt like another weight added to Elena's shoulders, another thread connecting her to a tapestry of crime she'd unwittingly become part of. "We'll need to coordinate with international authorities," Morrison explained, her voice low despite their secure location. "But we have to move carefully. These people have connections everywhere." Elena nodded, pulling up the wedding seating chart on her second monitor. "I've been marking potential surveillance positions. The chapel's architecture provides natural observation points, and the reception venue." She stopped as a new email notification popped up. From James, with an attachment, their engagement photos, professionally edited and ready for the society pages. "Look at this," she said, opening the first image. There she was, gazing adoringly at James against a sunset backdrop. His arm was around her waist, his smile perfect, his watch catching the light. An expensive timepiece she now knew was purchased with victims' money. "You're a good actress," Morrison observed quietly. Elena closed the photo. "I had a good teacher, apparently." She turned back to the seating chart. "We'll need plainclothes officers here, here, and here. The ceremony gives us a controlled environment. Everyone in predetermined positions, and the timing has to be perfect," Morrison added. "Too early, and we risk losing members of the network. Too late, and they might realize it's a trap. Elena pulled up another document. I've been tracking their communication patterns. There's a clear spike in activity around major social events. The detective leaned forward, studying the data. They're using these gatherings to exchange information and coordinate operations, which means the wedding will be their biggest opportunity. Yet, Elena's voice hardened with determination, and their last. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Elena reviewed the files one final time before encrypting them. The USB drive sat on her desk, innocent-looking despite its devastating contents. Tomorrow, it would be secured in an evidence lockup, one more piece in the case they were building. Her phone lit up with another text from James. Just reviewed the menu options. Everything has to be perfect for our special day. Elena typed back, a response full of appropriate enthusiasm, adding a heart emoji for good measure. The ease with which she now played her role sometimes frightened her, but then she remembered the faces in the case files. The retired couples who'd lost everything, the charities drained of their endowments, all the lives destroyed by James's perfect schemes. She touched her engagement ring, thinking of all it represented, not just James's deception, but her own counterplay. The perfect bride, planning. The perfect wedding, leading her perfect fiancé into a perfect trap. Everything will be perfect, she whispered to the empty room. Just not the way you imagine. The wedding seating chart spread across Elena's dining room table looked innocent enough. Cream-colored cards arranged in neat circles, each name written in elegant calligraphy. But like everything else in her life now, it held a double meaning. Each table had been carefully orchestrated to position plainclothes officers near key members of James's network. The flower arrangements will provide natural cover for surveillance equipment, Elena explained to Detective Morrison, who sat across from her reviewing the layout. And the table numbers correspond to the sound of a key in her front door lock froze them both mid-conversation. James wasn't supposed to be here for hours. Elena? His voice called out. Your car was outside, so I thought. Morrison moved, with practiced efficiency, gathering the sensitive documents while Eleanor swept the seating cards into their original box. By the time James appeared in the dining room doorway, they'd transformed the scene into an innocent wedding planning session. James, you're early. Elena rose to kiss him, her heart pounding beneath her calm exterior. This is Sarah, my old college friend. She's helping with the seating arrangements. Sarah Morrison. The detective offered her hand, now wearing the simple gold band they'd acquired for just such occasions. Elena's told me so much about you. James's handshake was warm, his smile genuine. Any friend of Elena's is family. Will you be joining us for dinner? I brought takeout from that Thai place you love, darling. Oh, I was just leaving. Morrison gathered her purse, now containing vital evidence. My husband's waiting. But the seating chart is coming along beautifully. After Morrison left, James pulled Elena close. You're working too hard on these details. That's why I hired the wedding planner. Elena leaned into his embrace, using the moment to steady her breathing. I want everything to be perfect. It already is. He kissed her temple, though I did notice something interesting today. Elena's pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. Oh? The guest list. Some last-minute additions I don't remember. Discussing? Oh, those are plus ones, she improvised smoothly. Sarah's husband, some of the bridesmaids' dates. Maya helped me update it. He seemed to accept this, moving to unpack the takeout containers. Elena watched him, wondering if she'd imagined the slight edge in his question. Later, reviewing their conversation, she'd recognize it as the first sign that James was becoming suspicious. The next close call came during the cake tasting. They'd been sampling flavors when James's phone buzzed. Elena, trained to notice details, caught the reflection of the message in the bakery's mirror. Henderson account compromised. Initiate Protocol 4. James excused himself smoothly, citing a client emergency. Elena maintained her disappointed bride expression until he left, then immediately texted Morrison. Within minutes, they'd confirmed that one of their surveillance operations had been detected. "We need to accelerate the timeline," Morrison insisted during their next secure meeting. "If they're initiating contingency protocols—" "No," Elena cut in. "The wedding is our best chance to catch the entire network. If we move too soon, half of them will scatter." She pulled up the latest intelligence on her laptop. "Look at these. Travel arrangements. They're all converging for the ceremony. James's partner from Dubai, the Swiss banking connection, even the Henderson Group's original facilitator. It's also a perfect opportunity for them to realize it's a trap," Morrison pointed out. Elena nodded. "Which is why every detail has to be perfect. One mistake, one misplaced officer." She left the consequences unspoken. The pressure peaked during the final wedding dress fitting. Elena stood on the pedestal, surrounded by mirrors, as the seamstress made minute adjustments. The hidden recording device they'd planned to conceal in the bodice would need to be repositioned. "It's not laying quite right," Elena mused, buying time as she texted Morrison under the pretense of photographing the dress. "Maybe we should adjust the seam." A movement in the mirror caught her attention. Through the boutique's window, she spotted one of James's associates, the man she'd identified as his security consultant, walking past. His casual glance inside lasted a fraction too long. That evening, over dinner with James at his penthouse, she noticed other subtle changes. His home office door, usually left ajar, was firmly closed. The stack of business cards on his desk had been rearranged. Small details, but to Elena's trained eye, they spoke volumes. "I was thinking," James said as they finished their wine, "perhaps we should consider a smaller ceremony, more intimate." Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What about all the arrangements we've already made? The deposits? Money's not an issue." His smile was warm, but his eyes were calculating. "I just want you to have the perfect day, without all the stress of a large event." She reached across the table, taking his hand. Every touch now felt like a negotiation. "But you know how much it means to have everyone there. All our friends, our professional colleagues." She smiled, letting her voice catch slightly. "I want the world to see me become Mrs. Walker." Something flickered in his expression. Satisfaction? Relief? He squeezed her hand. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." Later, in the security of her own apartment, Elena reviewed the recording of their conversation. Each interaction now required analysis. Each word could carry hidden meaning. The wedding was 2 weeks away, and the ground beneath her feet felt increasingly unstable. Her phone lit up with a text from Maya. "Final dress fitting tomorrow. Can't believe my big sister's really doing this." Elena stared at the message, guilt mixing with determination. Maya had no idea she was part of an elaborate sting operation. None of their real friends or family did. Their genuine joy and excitement had become part of Elena's cover, their innocent participation another layer in her deception. She touched her engagement ring, its weight now familiar as handcuffs. 2 more weeks of perfect performance, of walking. The razor's edge between hunter and prey. 2 weeks until she could finally stop pretending to be the perfect bride and reveal herself as something else entirely, the architect of James Walker's downfall. The life insurance policy arrived by courier 1 week before the wedding. Elena might have missed its significance entirely if she hadn't been so attuned to watching for James's moves. It was buried in a stack of routine wedding paperwork, venue, contracts, catering, final payments, marriage license applications, $5 million. Her name as beneficiary. Everything appeared perfectly normal for a wealthy man protecting his future wife, except for one detail that made her blood run cold. The policy had been backdated 3 months, with premiums paid in full. The timing is what concerns me, Detective Morrison said when they met in a secure location that evening. 3 months ago was when we first started surveillance on his network. Elena spread out the policy documents on the table between them. "Look at the fine print on the payout conditions. It covers accidents occurring during international travel. She pointed to another clause. And there's no waiting period if death occurs due to criminal activity by a third party. Morrison's expression darkened. He's setting up a contingency plan. If his network is compromised, he can stage his own death, collect the insurance through me, and disappear. Elena's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. Or if I've betrayed him. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. They both knew what happened. To people who crossed international criminal networks. There's more, Elena continued, pulling up files on her laptop. I did some digging into his previous engagements. All three women had similar policies. After they disappeared, the policies were claimed by different corporate entities. All shells we now know are connected to James's network. He's done this before, Morrison realized. The wedding, the policy, the disappearances, it's all part of his exit strategy. No, Elena corrected grimly. It's part of his business model. Those women didn't just run away. He made them disappear, collected the insurance, and probably used the payouts to fund his next operation. Her phone buzzed, a text from James. Missing you tonight, darling, but finalizing surprise honeymoon details. You'll love what I have planned. Elena showed the message to Morrison. He's booked first-class tickets to Dubai for the day after. The wedding. One way. Dubai. Morrison muttered. No extradition treaty. And his main banking partner is there. Elena pulled up another document. The same partner who processed the insurance claims for his previous fiancés. They were interrupted by another text from James. Just had a thought about the ceremony. Would you mind if we adjusted the processional, something more traditional? Elena felt a chill. The processional order had been carefully choreographed to position plainclothes officers. Any change now could compromise the entire operation. He knows, she whispered, or at least he suspects. This is a test. Morrison leaned forward. We need to move up the arrest. No. Elena's mind was racing. If we move too soon, his network will scatter, and anyone who knows about his previous victims could disappear forever. She looked at the insurance policy again. We need to let him think he's in control. Let him believe his plan is working. It's too dangerous, Morrison protested. If he suspects you're working with us, then we use that. Elena's voice took on a steel edge. We let him think he's caught me. Let him think he's turning the tables. She began typing a response to James. Traditional sounds perfect. You always know best, darling. Elena, Morrison's voice was concerned. What are you planning? He's not the only one who can set a trap. Elena pulled up the wedding seating chart. If he wants to change the processional, fine. We'll change everything. Make him think we've lost our carefully planned positions. Meanwhile, she began moving names around, creating a new pattern. We'll have two sets of plans, the one he'll discover if he goes looking, and the real one. Her phone buzzed again. James had sent a picture. Them at their engagement party, her smiling, up at him adoringly. Can't wait to spend forever with you, the caption read. Elena stared at the photo, remembering that moment. She'd already known the truth about him then, had already been working with Morrison. Her adoring smile had been as fake as his promises of forever. Forever isn't going to be quite what you planned, James, she murmured. She worked late into the night, coordinating with Morrison to restructure their entire operation. Every change had to appear to be exactly what James would expect from a compromise plan, while actually strengthening their position. The next morning, she met James for breakfast. He was in an excellent mood, obviously pleased by her quick agreement to his changes. I've been thinking, he said casually, perhaps we should consolidate our accounts before the honeymoon. Make things simpler for travel. Elena smiled, playing her role perfectly. That's probably wise. I'll have everything ready to transfer right after the ceremony. She watched the satisfaction flash in his eyes, knowing he was thinking of insurance policies and offshore accounts, of another perfect exit strategy coming together. But James wasn't the only one who knew how to play a long game. Elena had learned from the best, after all. And in 1 week, she would show him exactly how well she'd learned his lessons about patience, planning, and the perfect double cross. She squeezed his hand across the table, her engagement ring catching. The light. 1 week until she would reveal whether she was to be his next victim or his final downfall. The game was entering its endgame, and Elena intended to win. Elena stood perfectly still as the seamstress made the final adjustments to her wedding dress, each pin placement carefully coordinated to accommodate the hidden recording equipment. The flowing silk wasn't just chosen for its elegance. The fabric structure provided natural concealment for the surveillance devices that would document every conversation during the ceremony. "It's perfect," Maya enthused, circling her sister with tears in her eyes. "James won't know what hit him when he sees you walking down that aisle." "If only you knew," Eleanor thought, maintaining her bride-to-be smile. The double meaning of every comment, every preparation, weighed heavily now. She'd insisted Maya stay at a hotel the night before the wedding, not just for tradition's sake, but to keep her safely away from any potential fallout. "Speaking of the aisle," the wedding planner chimed in, "Mr. Walker's office called about the processional changes. They wanted to confirm the new timing." Elena nodded, her voice carefully modulated. "Yes, James is very particular about tradition." She caught Detective Morrison's eye in the mirror. The detective was undercover as her personal photographer today, documenting the final fitting. The changes James had requested weren't random. Elena had spent hours analyzing them, mapping how each adjustment aligned with known patterns in his previous operations. He was creating exit routes, contingency plans hidden within the ceremony's choreography. Later, in Morrison's secure office, Elena reviewed the final preparations. "The dress is ready. Recording devices are undetectable even at close range. And the backup plans?" Elena pulled up a series of documents on her laptop. "Everything's in place. If he tries to run, we have every exit covered. If he attempts to signal his network, will intercept. And if he makes a move against me," she trailed off, touching the delicate chain around her neck. A wedding gift from James that she'd discovered contained a GPS tracker. She wore it constantly now, letting him think his surveillance was working. "The hospitality suite at the venue," Morrison noted, reviewing the floor plans. "That's still a vulnerability." "No," Elena corrected, "it's an opportunity." James insisted on that specific room because of its private elevator access. He thinks it's his escape route, but she pulled up another diagram. "We'll have teams positioned here and here. The more he relies on his planned escape paths, the more predictable his movements become." Her phone buzzed. James again. "Final meeting with the minister tomorrow, darling. Don't forget to bring the vows we discussed." The vows. Elena had agonized over them, knowing every word would be scrutinized by both James and his network. They had to be perfect, loving enough to maintain her cover, but with subtle hints that would make him question, make him nervous, make him more likely to act rashly when the moment came. "Did you know," she said to Morrison, "that the traditional wedding vow about lawful matrimony originated from medieval property law? It was meant to prevent fraud." She smiled grimly. "I made sure to keep that phrase in, a little private joke between James and me." The detective's expression was concerned. "You're enjoying this part a little too much." "I have to," Elena replied softly, "because if I stop to really think about what he did to those other women, about what he planned to do to me..." She straightened her shoulders. "Better to focus on the end game." That evening, she met James for dinner. He'd chosen an intimate French restaurant, the same one where he'd proposed. Everything about him was perfect as always. His tailored suit, his warm smile, the way he held her hand across the table. Only now she recognized the practiced nature of every gesture. "Getting nervous?" he asked, stroking her fingers where the engagement ring sat heavily. "Not nervous," she answered truthfully. "Just ready. Ready to be Mrs. Walker." His smile widened. "Slightly. I like the sound of that. Everything you are becoming mine." The possessiveness in his tone would have once seemed romantic. Now it chilled her. She thought of the insurance policy, of the other women who had become his, and then vanished. "Forever," she agreed, raising her wineglass in a toast. Let him think she was toast his ownership of her. She was really toasting something else. The justice that was finally coming for his previous victims. Back home, Elena reviewed her checklist one final time. Everything was in place. The dress, with its hidden surveillance equipment, the strategically positioned officers, the international law enforcement teams standing by to move on James's network the moment he was in custody. She picked up her written vows, the paper heavy with promises she never intended to keep. In 3 days, she would stand before family, friends, and God himself and swear her eternal love to a man she was planning to destroy. "Till death do us part," she whispered to her reflection. The irony was not lost on her. James had planned for death to part them one way or another, but she had a different ending in mind for their story. Her phone lit up one final time that night. "Sweet dreams, future Mrs. Walker. Everything's coming together perfectly." Yes, Elena thought as she set her alarm. Everything was coming together perfectly indeed, just not the way James imagined. The prenuptial agreement sat unsigned on Elena's coffee table, its thick legal pages containing coded messages that would coordinate tomorrow's law enforcement response. She'd insisted on reviewing it one final time, playing the role of the cautious accountant while actually ensuring the document's covert signals remained intact. "Just being thorough," she told James earlier that evening during their last dinner as an engaged couple. "You taught me the importance of reading the fine print." Now, alone in her apartment for the last night before the wedding, Elena performed her final preparations with the precision of someone dismantling a bomb. Her wedding dress hung by the window, its hidden modifications tested and verified. The something borrowed pearl necklace from Maya contained a backup transmitter. Even her bridal bouquet had been specially constructed to conceal critical evidence. Her phone buzzed, a text from James. "Can't sleep. Thinking of you, my beautiful bride." Elena studied the message, analyzing it as she now did all their communications. Was it genuine anticipation, or was he also awake, finalizing his own plans? She pictured him in his penthouse, perhaps reviewing escape routes or coordinating with his network. A soft knock at her door made her freeze. It was nearly midnight. No one was supposed to be here. She approached cautiously, checking the peephole to see Detective Morrison's face. "Sorry," the detective said as Elena let her in. "But there's been a development." Elena led her to the kitchen, where the running water would mask their conversation from any surveillance. "What kind of development?" "We intercepted communications between James and his Dubai contact. They're spooked about something. There's talk of accelerating the timeline." Elena's mind raced. "The honeymoon flight?" Morrison nodded. "Changed to a private charter, departing immediately after the reception." "That actually works in our favor," Elena mused, pulling up the seating chart on her tablet. "The earlier they try to move, the more they have to rely on prearranged protocols. Less room for improvisation, unless they're changing the whole plan," Morrison warned. "These people don't get caught because they stick to plans when they sense trouble." Elena moved to her window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, James was making his own preparations. Was he planning to abandon the elaborate wedding scheme altogether, go to ground, force her hand? "No," she said finally, turning back to Morrison. "He won't run. Not yet. His entire operation depends on maintaining appearances. The wedding is too perfect a cover to abandon. All his associates in one place, legitimate reason for large financial transfers, social proof of his respectability. And if you're wrong, Elena picked up the prenuptial agreement, then we have this. He needs my signature on these documents. The funds can't move without them. She smiled grimly. He trained me too well in following the money. Now I know exactly how to make him follow mine. Morrison studied her with concern. You know, it's not too late to pull out. We have enough evidence. No, Elena cut her off. We need them all. The whole network. And we need to find those other women. She touched her engagement ring. They trusted him too. They deserve justice. After Morrison left, Elena performed one final check of her preparations. The wedding vows she'd memorized, loaded with subtle messages that would make James increasingly uncertain. The seating arrangement that would position key witnesses near plainclothes officers. The marriage license with its carefully worded clauses that would help track international assets. Her phone buzzed again. James had sent a photo, the sunset, view from his penthouse. Our last sunset as separate people. Tomorrow, everything becomes ours. Elena typed back the expected loving response, then opened her safe. Inside lay a file containing everything she'd discovered about his previous fiancé. 3 women who'd thought they were living a fairy tale, only to disappear into carefully constructed narratives of cold feet and stolen assets. Tomorrow isn't about becoming yours, James, she whispered to the photographs of the missing women. It's about making sure you never do this to anyone else. She changed into her nightgown, chosen to match what James would expect his blushing bride to wear on the eve of her wedding. Even this private moment had to maintain the facade. One final performance before tomorrow's grand finale. As she lay in bed, Elena rehearsed every detail of the coming day. The ceremony, the timing, the signals. She'd learned from James that the perfect con required perfect preparation. Tomorrow would prove which of them had learned that lesson better. Her last thought before sleep was of the moment she'd first suspected him, when professional instinct had overridden romantic hope. Tomorrow, those same instincts would help her. Destroy the man she'd once agreed to marry. The engagement ring caught the moonlight as she finally drifted off, its diamonds throwing shadows on her wall like bars across a prison cell. Dawn broke over St. Michael's Chapel, painting its stained glass windows in shards of amber and rose. Elena stood in the bridal suite, watching the morning light transform her wedding dress into something almost ethereal. The hidden recording. Devices were invisible beneath its elegant folds, just as her true intentions were concealed behind her serene bride's smile. You're so calm, Maya marveled, helping Elena into her dress. I was a mess on my wedding day. If you only knew, Elena thought, maintaining her composed expression. Her sister's hands were steady as they fastened the dozens of tiny buttons running down her spine. Each button had been strategically positioned to avoid interfering with the surveillance equipment. Everything's ready in the chapel, the wedding coordinator announced, tablet in hand. Mr. Walker just arrived to dress in the groom's suite. Eleanor's pulse quickened slightly. She'd insisted the groom's suite be on the opposite side of the chapel. Standard tradition, she'd explained to James, but really to ensure complete separation. Until the ceremony. Each moment until then was choreographed to prevent him from detecting any of the final preparations. Her phone lit up with a message from Detective Morrison, disguised in her contacts as her photography assistant. All teams in position. Exterior security confirmed. Elena deleted the message immediately, then opened one from James. Can't wait to see you, my beautiful bride. Everything's perfect. The irony of his words almost made her smile. Perfect was what James did best. Perfect crimes, perfect escapes, perfect disappearances. But today, that perfection would be his undoing. Time for hair and makeup, Maya announced, ushering in the styling team. Elena sat perfectly still as they worked, using the time to mentally review every detail of the plan. The bouquet with its hidden evidence, the vows with their coded messages, the seating arrangement that would trap James's entire network. A commotion outside the bridal suite drew her attention. Through the door, she heard James's voice. "Just want to check on my bride." "Bad luck to see her before the ceremony," Maya called out, rushing to block the door. "Don't you dare come in here, James." Walker. Elena's heart raced. Was this a genuine romantic gesture, or was he trying to verify her location, testing security, looking for signs of deception? "At least let me give her something," James called through the door. "A special gift for my bride." Maya retrieved a small box from him, bringing it to Elena. Inside lay a delicate diamond bracelet. Elena's trained eye recognized it immediately, identical to ones given to his previous fiancés before they disappeared. "It's beautiful," she called out, loud enough for James to hear. "I'll wear it during the ceremony." "I love you." His voice came through the door, warm and sincere. "I love you too," she responded, years of practice keeping her voice steady. She handed the bracelet to her sister. "Put this with my things for the reception, please. I don't want to risk losing it during the ceremony." The bracelet would never touch her wrist. She knew it contained a tracking device, just like the necklace he'd given her earlier. Let him think she was accumulating his trackers, playing into his hands. As the morning progressed, Elena moved through her bridal preparations like an actress hitting her marks. She let Maya photograph her getting ready, knowing James would want evidence of a normal, happy wedding morning. She accepted champagne, but didn't drink it, aware that James's network would be watching for any sign of impaired judgment. The wedding coordinator appeared again. 30 minutes until the ceremony. Time for final touches. Elena stood before the full-length mirror, studying her reflection. The dress was exquisite, its white silk flowing like water, concealing its secrets. Her makeup was flawless, projecting the perfect image of a blushing bride. The borrowed pearl necklace sat elegantly at her throat, its hidden transmitter ready to record every word. "You look like a princess," Maya whispered, tearing up. "No," Elena thought, "not a princess. A hunter, dressed in white instead of camouflage." And James was about to learn that he wasn't the only one who knew how to set a perfect trap. Her phone buzzed one final time. Morrison. "Guest list confirmed. All targets present." Elena deleted the message and turned to the wedding coordinator. "I'm ready." The word carried its own weight of truth. She was ready. Ready to end James's game. Ready to find justice for his previous victims. Ready to prove that even the perfect con could be broken by someone who understood its machinery. "Places, everyone," the coordinator called out. "It's time." Elena lifted her bouquet, feeling the weight of the hidden evidence within it. In less than an hour, she would walk down the aisle toward James Walker. And for once, his perfect smile would be genuine, because he wouldn't realize until it was too late that his bride was about to become his downfall. The wedding march filled St. Michael's Chapel as Elena stood at the entrance, her father's arm linked through hers. Through the wooden doors, she could hear the rustle of guests rising to their feet. Every seat was filled, James's criminal associates mixed with innocent family members, plainclothes officers positioned strategically throughout. "Ready, princess?" her father whispered. Elena squeezed his arm in response, unable to trust her voice. The weight of what she was about to do, the public destruction of a man she'd once thought she loved, the risk to everyone involved, pressed against her chest like lead. The doors swung open. Afternoon light streamed through stained glass, casting kaleidoscope patterns across the aisle. Elena's first step forward triggered a series of carefully orchestrated movements throughout the chapel. Detective Morrison, disguised as a photographer, shifted to cover the left exit. Two other officers, dressed as ushers, moved to flank the emergency doors. James stood at the altar, perfect in his morning suit, his smile radiating joy and triumph. Elena recognized the expression now, the same one he'd worn in photographs. With his previous fiancés, the smile of a predator about to claim his prey. She began her measured walk down the aisle, each step bringing her closer to the confrontation she'd spent months planning. Her bouquet, heavy with hidden evidence, steadied her trembling hands. Through her veil, she noted the positions of James's network, his Dubai banking contact in the third row, the Henderson Group's facilitator near the back, his security team, scattered throughout in their expensive suits. Halfway down the aisle, she saw James's expression flicker. Something in her walk, her posture, had triggered his instincts. His eyes darted to the nearest exit, where one of his security men gave an imperceptible shake of his head. No clear escape route. Elena kept walking, her pace unchanging. The hidden transmitter in her necklace picked up every whispered conversation, every nervous shuffle. James's network was growing restless, sensing something amiss, but unable to identify the threat. 3 steps from the altar, she saw the moment James decided to proceed despite his suspicions. His smile returned full force as he stepped forward to take her hand. His fingers were warm against hers, steady despite the tension she could feel coursing through him. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice carrying to the farthest corners of the chapel. Elena felt James relax slightly. Beside her, he still believed he controlled the situation, that his escape plans remained viable. The ceremony proceeded according to tradition until they reached the exchange of vows. Elena turned to face James, lifting her veil. Their eyes met, and she began to speak the words they'd prepared, but with subtle emphasis that made his face pale. "I, Elena, take you, James, to be my lawfully wedded husband." The stress on lawfully made his fingers tighten on hers. "To have and to hold. From this day forward." Her voice carried an undertone that transformed the traditional words into something more menacing. For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, James's smile became fixed. His eyes darted to his security team, but Elena's carefully crafted seating arrangement had separated them, leaving him isolated at the altar. "If anyone knows any reason why these two should not be joined in lawful matrimony," the minister intoned, "speak now or forever hold your peace." Elena felt James's pulse quicken through their joined hands. This was the moment his network had planned to create a diversion if needed, but before anyone could move, the chapel doors opened. Detective Morrison strode down the aisle, badge glinting in the stained glass light. The photograph of this moment would later win a journalism award. Elena in white silk, James in his perfect suit, and Morrison's determined figure approaching through shafts of colored light. "James Walker," Morrison's voice rang out. "You're under arrest." Elena stepped back, releasing James's hand. His expression transformed from confusion to fury as she reached into her bouquet and withdrew the envelope of evidence. "The Dubai transfers," she said calmly, loud enough for his entire network to hear. "The Henderson accounts, the insurance, and policies on your previous fiancés. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the patterns?" James lunged for the envelope, but Elena's months of preparation had anticipated this moment. 2 officers disguised as groomsmen grabbed his arms. The chapel erupted into chaos as more officers revealed themselves, moving to secure members of James's network before they could flee. "You were perfect," Elena continued, her voice carrying over the commotion. "Every detail, every gesture, every lie. But that was your mistake, James. Nobody's that perfect, and you taught me too well about following the money." She watched as understanding dawned in his eyes, understanding that his perfect conquest had become his perfect trap, that every wedding preparation had been choreographed not for romance, but for his downfall. "Goodbye, James," Elena said softly. "Consider this my wedding gift, the one thing no one's ever given you before, justice." As the officers led James away in handcuffs, Eleanor turned to face the stunned congregation. Her sister Maya's shocked face, her father's confusion, the mix of horror and realization among the guests. The weight of her deception lifted, replaced by the heavier burden of its consequences. But in the back of the chapel, she saw 3 women she'd arranged to have present. James's previous fiancés, found alive but damaged by their experiences. Their eyes met hers with understanding and gratitude. For them and for all the others James might have hurt, the price had been worth paying. The perfect white wedding had become the perfect sting operation, and Elena Martinez, the bride who had never intended to say, "I do," had finally spoken her real truth. The newspaper headlines would later call it the wedding sting. Photos of James being led away in handcuffs, still in his morning suit, splashed across every major publication. But in the immediate aftermath of the arrest, Elena faced a different kind of chaos, the personal one. "You were investigating him this whole time?" Maya's voice cracked with disbelief as they stood in the bridal suite, now transformed into an impromptu command center. Outside, police sirens wailed as members of James's network were transported to various precincts. Elena carefully removed her veil, unpinning the hidden transmitter. "I couldn't tell you? Couldn't tell anyone? It was the only way to protect you. All." Her father sat heavily in a corner chair, still processing the revelation that his daughter's wedding had been an elaborate law enforcement operation. The bouquet lay dissected on a table, evidence bags containing documents carefully labeled by forensics teams. "Mrs. Martinez?" A junior officer appeared at the door. "Detective Morrison needs you for the preliminary statements." Elena caught her reflection in the mirror as she stood. Still the perfect bride, but now the illusion had shattered. The white dress felt like a costume she could finally remove. Detective Morrison was coordinating with international authorities in the chapel's study. Dubai team confirmed multiple arrests. London and Geneva units moving on the banking connections. "It's falling like dominoes." Eleanor nodded, professional mask firmly in place despite the emotional turmoil. The prenup documents already secured. His entire network's financial structure was embedded in the signing papers the minute he put his signature on them. "He gave us everything we needed," Elena finished. A bitter smile touched her lips. His own perfectionism made him predictable. Every document had to be authentic, legally binding. Through the study's window, she watched police photographers documenting the scene in the chapel. Her perfect wedding transformed into a crime scene. But among the chaos, she spotted the 3 women she'd helped find, James's previous targets, brought in to witness his downfall. One caught her eye and nodded slightly. In that moment, Eleanor knew that every sacrifice had been worth it. Every lie, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, all of it justified by the justice finally being served. The weight of her engagement ring had never felt heavier. She slipped it off, placing it into an evidence bag. "Make sure this gets back to the jeweler in Dubai. It's tied to one of his first victims." Outside, reporters were already gathering, drawn by the unprecedented story. Elena could see the headlines, forming "Bride brings down international crime ring." But they wouldn't understand the true cost, the months of deception, the trust she'd broken, the relationships that might never recover. Maya appeared in the doorway, her bridesmaid's dress, incongruous among the police uniforms. "Mom's asking for you." Elena closed her eyes briefly. This was the part no procedure could prepare her for, facing her family with the truth of her deception. But as she'd learned from James, sometimes the perfect lie could serve the greater truth. And today, finally, all the lies could end. The federal courthouse steps were crowded with reporters 3 months after the wedding that wasn't. Elena stood at the prosecution table, no longer in bridal white, but in a sharp charcoal suit that armor-plated her against James's stare from the defendant's box. "The evidence speaks for itself," she testified, her voice carrying through the hushed courtroom. Each victim was carefully selected, groomed, and positioned for maximum financial extraction. The wedding schemes were just the final act in a pattern of sophisticated fraud. The court documents told the story in cold, hard, Numbers, millions siphoned through shell companies, lives destroyed through carefully orchestrated deceptions. James's perfect facade had crumbled under the weight of evidence Elena had gathered during their engagement. His face remained impassive as the verdict was read, guilty on all counts. Only his eyes betrayed him, burning with a mixture of rage. And she noted with grim satisfaction, reluctant respect for how completely she'd outplayed him. The defendant's own prenuptial agreement, the judge noted, provided the framework for unraveling his entire operation. A rather poetic justice. Outside the courthouse, Elena met with James's previous fiancés, now part of a victim restitution program. Their recovered assets would help rebuild the lives his perfect lies had almost destroyed. In their eyes, she saw her own story reflected, the seduction of his charm, the shock of discovery, the strength to fight back. "You did it," Detective Morrison said quietly, joining her as the press dispersed. "The Dubai connection is cooperating. The whole network's unraveling." Elena nodded, watching James being led away to begin his 30-year sentence. His perfect crimes had met their perfect end, wrapped in white silk and sealed with handcuffs. Instead of a kiss, justice, she reflected, had its own kind of poetry. 6 months after the trial, Elena sat in her new office, running her fingers over a freshly printed business card. Martinez Financial Forensics and Investigation was embossed in clean, professional lettering, no elaborate designs or hidden meanings. Just simple truth. The Wall Street Journal article framed on her wall called her the bride who broke the case, but that wasn't the story she wanted to define her. Instead, she'd built something meaningful from the ashes of her almost marriage, a firm specializing in protecting potential fraud victims, particularly those targeted through emotional manipulation. Maya had been her first employee, bringing her event planning skills to an unexpected new use, identifying patterns in social gatherings used to facilitate financial crimes. "Wolves dress up their hunting grounds as parties," she'd observed during their reconciliation. Who better to spot them than someone who knows every detail of how these events work? The sisters had rebuilt their relationship slowly, trust returning through shared purpose rather than shared secrets. Elena's parents, too, had come to understand that her deception had been an act of protection rather than betrayal. Detective Morrison, now a close friend, often referred cases their way. "Some wounds need more than just legal healing," she'd said. "Your experience helps people recover both their assets and their trust in themselves." Elena's new business card wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that, she'd learned, was worth more than all the perfect lies in the world. 1 year to the day after the wedding that wasn't, Elena opened a stack of thank-you notes from James's victims. They arrived regularly now, each sharing a story of recovery and renewal. A retired teacher who'd recovered her pension. A widow whose foundation had been restored. 3 former fiancés who'd found their voices and their assets again. "Your story helped me trust my instincts," one wrote. "When something seems too perfect, it usually is." The note sat beside a different kind of paper on her desk, an invitation to speak at an international conference on romance-based financial fraud. Elena's case had sparked a revolution in how law enforcement approached these crimes, recognizing that the most dangerous predators often came bearing rings instead of weapons. Maya poked her head into the office, waving a client folder. "Another wedding-based investment scheme. Want to help me spot the red flags?" Elena smiled, reaching for the file. 1 year ago, she'd walked down the aisle to expose a perfect lie. Today, she and her sister walked alongside others, helping them find their way back to truth. In Elena's office, a small memory box sits on a shelf behind her desk. Inside, carefully preserved, are the artifacts of a perfect deception. A wedding program with hidden codes, a seating chart that mapped a criminal network, a ring that once symbolized both love and lies. She keeps them not as mementos of James, but as reminders that sometimes the greatest truths emerge from carefully crafted deceptions. Occasionally, when meeting new clients, she opens the box and shares its contents. Perfect isn't real, and tells them, but justice is, and sometimes to protect what's real, we have to see through what's perfect. The white dress hangs in an evidence locker somewhere, its hidden wires and transmitters long since documented. But Elena's own disguise, the mask of the perfect bride, has been permanently retired. In its place, she wears something far more valuable, her true self, imperfect but uncompromised. Some say love is blind. Elena knows better. Love sees clearly, even when, especially when, it's looking straight into the heart of deception.